Welcome back to the podcast, Unbinding the Bible. This is a by the book episode, a conversation with Marla Taviano. And I am really excited about this episode for this week on the podcast. Marla, for many of you who know, is my older sister, and we have had a great relationship once we both left the home after all of our bitter fighting that we did as kids. But we've become really close over the years, and Marla sent a challenge out to many of her followers that if she could help me ratchet up the listens on my latest episode, that I would have her on my podcast. And that's in fact what's happened. So congratulations to Marla. She took me from about 130 downloads on my last episode all the way to 358, and climbed of my 231 episodes, climbed all the way to number 66. So that's exciting for me. I know there are lots of you now listening to this episode who've not listened to any of my episodes before, but I do plan to have a great conversation with Marla. Before I introduce her, let me first start by saying thank you to our sponsor for this episode is our mutual friend Judd, who, following a post from Marla a few weeks ago online, said, quote, "I would pay actual money to hear a conversation between you two." To which I responded, and I would gladly accept actual money to have a conversation. So Judd Venmo'd both of us some money, said to buy a drink on him and enjoy that during the conversation. Full disclosure, it is 9:20 in the morning on a Sunday. So I am not drinking. I'm actually drinking coffee, but Judd, I promise I will go out and buy that drink. Thanks so much for your friendship and your support over the years. We both greatly appreciate it. So, without any more of an introduction, let me just introduce Marla, and then we're going to dive into hopefully a fun and engaging conversation. So, Marla Taviano is into books, love, justice, anti racism, blue, gray, rainbows, and thrifting. She reads and writes for a living, wears her heart on her t shirts, and is obsessed with making poem art. She's the author of Unbelieve, Jaded, and Whole, and lives in South Carolina with her kids and her cats. Marla, I know this is a long time coming, but welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much, Josh, my brother. This is okay. I'm over here trying not to laugh. I'm so excited that Judd sponsored this podcast. Lest someone think that he sent us hundreds of dollars. He did not, but he's the only one that sent us any dollars. And I'm super thrilled. I've never been paid any amount to be on a podcast. So this is this is so exciting. And it's one of those serendipitous things. Like he's from our past life. We grew up in church together in school, and we're all different now, and it's just really exciting. Yes, so I am thrilled to be here. I did not know if this would ever happen, but when you, put out your last episode about why you left your church last fall, I thought, this might be my in because I have a lot of thoughts about going to church and leaving church and why we do that. So, yeah, I'm excited to see where this goes.
Absolutely. And that's actually the more I thought about it, one of the fun reasons it is to have you on is I honestly think and listeners, you'll all hear we have different perspectives about what we think of the conservative evangelical church and how we approach the Bible and how we think about kind of our worldview, even though we came from the same place. But one of the most important things I believe is needed for both those inside and outside the church today is the ability to have sensible, reasonable, um, normal conversations with people that we disagree with. And I think one of the things that we're going to discover, I mean, Marla and I think a lot alike in terms of what we believe, but we have some differences too. And I think the church needs to position itself, honestly, to be willing to listen to the reasons people have for choosing not to believe as they do and having the humility to listen to those responses. So, part of the reason why this is a by the book episode is Marla, you are an author, and I don't know if everybody that is from my normal side knows that. So I just wanted you to kind of share You said you've done this a lot, so you probably have a nice succinct way of telling the story, but take your time and just tell us a little bit about your story. Let us get to know you from, eager conservative evangelical author right on through how I guess you would define deconstruction right up to the present. And then we can just kind of, go from there.
Okay, it's funny you should say that I have this nice succinct way of doing this. This is actually, I think, my 26th podcast interview this year. I've done a bunch over the years, but I decided to make a challenge this year. I turn 50 on Halloween. Speaking of birthdays, you had a birthday yesterday, so happy birthday to you.
Hey, thank you.
I
Thank you.
swear that I remember going to the hospital to visit you, and then I had to go home with Barbara Garber, who was keeping me while mom and dad were at the hospital, and I was very, very, very unhappy about that. So, yeah, I remember my little baby brother being born, when I was almost 3. Anyway, I it depends on the podcast what I say, and I don't always know what's going to come out of my mouth, but since this is a by the book episode and we're gonna focus on the books, that gives me, somewhere to start. You said that I was eager. Yes, I was very bless my heart, so
Yeah.
eager, so zealous, so just on fire for Jesus and young wives and helping them, with all the wisdom that I had accumulated over the 6 years of marriage that I had under my belt before I wrote my book about marriage. So, here's me. I'll back up a little bit, and I also wanna get into this, maybe you can make a note of this or I'll make a note. You and I have talked many times. We grew up in the same house, 3 years apart, and y I remember you saying that you, like, didn't even read a book until when? When's the first time you read a book?
Uh, believe it or not, it was post-college. So,
Okay. Okay,
uh-huh.
so here I am. I start reading when I'm 4. I learned to read from Sesame Street. I'm reading at 4. I have 2 years of preschool. We're learning 1 letter a week, and I'm, like, reading chapter books, and then I'm in kindergarten, I'm in 1st grade, I am bored to literal tears. Like, I come home from 1st grade at my private Christian school in tears because it's the most boring thing that I can ever imagine. The teacher asks mom and dad if they would consider moving me to 2nd grade because 1st grade is so boring for me. Well, I agonized over that because all my friends from church were actually in the 2nd grade, but what stopped me from doing it was that they all knew cursive already and I had not learned cursive, and I didn't like the idea of going halfway through 2nd grade and being behind on cursive. So I stayed put, which was probably a mistake, but I read voraciously. So I always had like 5, 6, 7 books going in a stack. I would read and reread and reread. I would go to the library, get all the books, go to the church library, get all the books, constantly reading. And it's funny to me. Oh, I even set up a library in my room for all of you, my younger siblings, you and our 2 sisters, to come check out books. But I feel like maybe you didn't check any out or you did check them out, but they they did not get read.
I
Um
definitely did not check any books out, I can tell you that. So,
Okay, so books have just been a thing in my life from the very beginning. And I always loved to write too. So in 5th grade, I was chosen to go to this Power of the Pen conference. A couple of my teachers said that I would be a published author someday. In 8th grade, my speech was chosen to be read at the groundbreaking ceremony for our new K through 12 school in our tiny little Ohio town. Um, I majored in nursing because I didn't know what I wanted to do, and there were nursing scholarships available, so I did that, and 2 quarters into it at my, Christian college, I saw a video and it had blood in it, and I realized that I can't look at blood, and so I thought, "Well, maybe that's not the major for me." So, I switched to elementary education, but I earned money working as a telemarketer and in the dish pit at Cedarville College, but also, um, writing curriculum for one of my professors, my advisor, and grading papers for another teacher. So writing was always there. I just kind of didn't know that you could make a living from it. I'm not sure that you actually I haven't made a living from my books. I do write and edit for other people for a living. But in 1998, I got married, and as I'm writing things, I'm like, "Oh, here's a new thing that I can write about. I can write about my marriage. I can help other women have a good marriage like me." And so I'm reading and reading and reading all these marriage books that I can get my hands on. Of course, they're all very conservative evangelical marriage books. And then I write one of my own, and in a roundabout, long story short way, I got published. I got discovered and published in 2006. My book, From Blushing Bride to Wedded Wife, came out. Harvest House Publishers in Eugene, Oregon published it. And then I went on, in 2007, 2008, 2009, 4 years in a row, I had 4 books published, one on marriage, one on sex, one on motherhood, and one as a pregnancy devotional. And then my sob story is that the internet came and didn't know what was happening, and I wasn't in the the right position to keep my books going. They started going out of print and blah, blah, blah. Um, so I have 4. I actually have them sitting right here. I often bring them with me, when I do a podcast interview, and they are completely full, um, of crap. I'm rereading From Blushing Bride to Wedded Wife right now. I reread it, in 2023, and now I'm reading it one more time with a pen in my hand. I'm working on a project actually, which we can talk about later, but kind of as a way of redeeming the book, a way of showing the toxic, nature of the beliefs that I held about marriage and about the world, and how I've changed and why it matters that we wake up and change. And so, yeah, that's the writing journey part of it. So my faith deconstruction, which I think we're gonna talk a lot about probably, is I never know exactly where that started. I was looking back in some old journals. I have 62 journals that I wrote to God from 2000 to 2020, and there's a lot of good, helpful, painful stuff in there. And I always thought that it was around 2009, 2010 when I read a book called The Hole in Our Gospel by Richard Stearns, that he says something to the effect of, if your good news isn't good news to an AIDS orphan in Uganda, is it really good news? You might have a hole in your gospel. And what he meant was, if your quote unquote good news is just Jesus died on the cross for your sins, ask him into your heart, stay out of hell, but you don't feed this orphan or give him medicine or give him a place to live, then that good news actually isn't enough. And that rocked my world. I'm reading this by the pool in 2009 while my kids are playing, and I'm like, "Whoa, whoa, 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 whoa." I thought and really believed that salvation was it, that Jesus was enough. Like, what else do we need? And slowly realizing that I have everything else I need. So Jesus is enough for me. At Cedarville, we sang a song, Christ is all I need. We sang it like this, like it was an anthem. And yeah, like I said, I slowly realized, yes, Christ could be all I need once all my other needs are taken care of, which is how it usually is in white conservative evangelical Christianity. Meanwhile, other people aren't so fortunate, and to just go to them and share Jesus with them without meeting their physical needs, is not good news. And it actually even says that in the Bible that I had read, speaking of you not reading, I read the Bible from cover to cover. I don't know how many times, but it was more than 10. So before you're even opening your Bible to become a pastor for 20 years, I've already read the dang thing for like so many times. And the part that says faith without works is dead, well, I must have skipped that. Or maybe I thought because it says in another place that all you need is faith. So, that kinda started it, but looking back through my journals, I had started to question, um, the end times, the rapture. People had come into my life that were saying different things than what I believed, and I thought, "Oh, no, this is scary." So, a lot of cognitive dissonance, but it happened
Mhm.
slowly so that I it was manageable, I guess. But the person I give like 95% of the credit to for waking me up is Rachel Held Evans. In 2010 or 2011, she had a book come out called Evolving in Monkeytown, which is now called Faith Unraveled. And I had discovered her online as when I was a mommy blogger back in the day, and she was just like me, like, super smart, valedictorian, her public school, witnessing to all her friends, super knowledgeable about the Bible, winning all the Bible quizzes and the sword drills, and she was starting to question things and have doubts, and she wrote honestly about them, and it scared the heck out of me, and I thought, "I cannot read this." And then I thought, "Wait a second, Marla, if you can't read this, like, what if she's right? Go ahead, read it. Prove her wrong, and you're fine. But read it and you can't prove her wrong, and she's actually right. Don't you wanna be right?" Like, I wanted to be
Mm,
good, and I wanted to be right. Like, those were the 2 things that were very, very, very important to me, and to be honest, they still are important to me, but I'm trying to, let go of let go of both of them a little bit. But she gave me the permission when I finally let my guard down and let her in and listen to what she said because she wasn't one of these, um, people from the outside trying to shake my faith. She was me. And so that just led down the slippery slope that they warn about, blah, 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 and we can go into as much of that as you want, but yeah, she changed my whole entire life. For people who are listening who don't know, her, she died tragically in 2019 at the age of 37, um, and I think about her maybe not every day, but probably every other day, wondering, like, what she would be saying, what she would be thinking right now, um, because she was amazing, and I have so many books that did that opened my eyes, that woke me up, and, you and I have joked in the past that I mostly only listened to your by the book episodes because I had stopped reading the Bible and I wasn't super interested, in hearing you unbind it, but whenever you had a book, like an author on, I would be like, "Okay, I can listen, to this." So you and I always laughed about that one, so it's kinda funny
that's right.
now that
That's
I
right.
get to do a by the book episode. So yeah, that's the succinct slash not succinct story of that, and then why don't you ask me what anything that stood out to you or you wanna know more about? I know you know this whole story, so this is for your audience, your fans, what you think they'd like to hear.
Right. No, and thank you for that was a great overview, a great chronology, just the influential players. When I do this podcast, I always realize that I have a bit of a diverse audience myself. So I have several who say they have to have left their church. We have a lot who are still in churches, but who are sensitive to the fact that we need some things, unbound, if you will. But one of the things you drew on, which I always like to talk about, is that I think what makes some present day conservative Christians uncomfortable is not your faith without works is dead, that part they get, but is the part where you say, Jesus, Christ is all I need or whatever, and you're like, well, maybe he's not all I need. And I think that phrase right there, I had a really good conversation with one of my friends, James, who said that what he's noticing right now in our time is two different ways of approaching Jesus, and one of them he calls the salvific gospel. So we think that Jesus is preaching, like you said, how to get saved, like that's it, and then
Yeah.
avoid hell and be freed from your sins. The other is the gospel of the kingdom. And the gospel of the kingdom is the good news of what life in the kingdom can actually be like. So, for an example, this is the one that has stood out to me the most is that I remember growing up and I had my time with my reformed theologians and my reformed seminary and things like that, where the John Pipers of the world, it's all justification by faith, justification by faith. Believe these things, like you said, it's without works, right? You're justified by your faith in Jesus, and that's this whole idea that you need to wrap your mind and heart around intellectually, and then you're saved. And boo hoo to those poor Catholics who think that you have to do things in life. Like that's the way I remember it being taught. Like
Yeah,
people who think if you're good in this life, then you become a saint or whatever. And they nitpick about these things and then feel justified, right, within
yeah.
themselves that because they believe the right thing, now they're on the right track. And I found it really strange to me that people end up being justified in their mind by what they believe. And it's no longer really about Jesus. But when Jesus came, he preached the kingdom. Here's what life in the kingdom is like. And if a person really believes that you are justified because of Jesus, then your race, your brain power, your money, your gifts, your strengths, your gender, none of that matters at all. And everybody is put on the exact same playing field before Jesus. The trouble is, there are massive amounts of conservative evangelical Christians who would claim all day long they adhere to justification by faith, but do not actually believe that people of other races or other ethnicities or other genders or those who are poor actually are as valuable as they are, which is why you find these little children in parts of the world who aren't being fed, and you have Christians being like, well, I guess I hope Jesus does something about that because I'm certainly not. And so as I listen to your story, because like I'm always looking for what are the similarities, because what you're touching on is so important for people to know. And so yeah, I've read some of Rachel Held Evans' things myself, and I really loved what you said about, hey, I want to like embrace the truth, but if she's right and I'm wrong and I avoid this because I'm afraid, again, that's
Mhm.
not a characteristic of life as a kingdom follower. Where
No.
fear has been removed by love, according to Jesus and John. So let's go that route. And so, yeah, I just those are the things that when I see because I'm sensing for you a large part of your deconstruction is that okay. So let me ask a follow up then. So two things. The first is what is that actually like for you personally when you go back and read books that you wrote and that you published, but you now think are crap? And second of all, give us a couple examples of what you mean by what you wrote is crap. Keep it calm. No, I'm just kidding.
No,
No.
okay, alright. So, this is this is funny because I actually just last night, um, put something online, and this is you and I have talked about this, but so I've been writing forever. My books came out, like, my first books, my Christian books, right before the internet hit. So I missed that window. That's why they went out of print because there was no Facebook, there was no Instagram, there's no so I didn't realize I had to get out in the world and tell people about my books or no one would buy them. I thought that you just published a book and then everybody knew about it and bought it. Um, so if the timing would have been different for me and I would have put my books out in the world when I was on Facebook, Instagram, talking about when I was blogging, all of this, then it could have gone better. But actually, I am so glad that those books went out of print because what a hashtag blessing to have crap books that you wrote go out of print so that
Yeah.
people can't access them as easily. You actually can still get them. But okay, so this project that I'm working on, I have decided that I'm going to start putting out into the world. And I've done this many times over the past few years, but I'm serious about it this time. I'm really going to write this thing. And so last night um I forget how I said it, something about if this ignorant, arrogant woman could write these things 20 years ago and then change her mind and heart, I feel like there's hope for people. And that woman being me and these things that I wrote in 2005. So it's a book about marriage called From Blushing Bride to Wedded Wife, Practical Advice from a Girlfriend, What Marriage is Really Like. And there are several things as I've been reading this, they they hurt my heart, they make me angry, they make me ashamed, like, the things that I am saying to women, it's internalized misogyny. It is me putting myself down, putting women down, blaming women for everything, like, on and on and on. I am just taking what the patriarchy and conservative evangelicalism have spoon-fed me. I'm chewing it up, and I'm spitting it out in a modern, funny way, but it's the same stuff. So this is what I posted, and this is actually probably a little milder than some of the things I'm gonna work up the courage to post. But I am talking about submission and the modern woman is what I'm saying. So this is 2005, this is me, I am 29 years old, and I'm writing this. Married women today find themselves in a quandary. They balk at a traditional marriage, but secretly long for so many of its elements. At first glance, many of the Bible's commands seem legalistic, chauvinistic, and outdated. But after ignoring those commands and doing things our own way, we realize that God's way has merit after all. And then I'll skip a little bit down to here. The word submission is taboo among most non Christian women in the 21st century. Writers rarely mention it, even with contempt, as if merely typing the word will invite the gods of feminism to swoop down and strike them dead. The general consensus is that women have come too far and worked too hard to be demeaned and degraded by that horrid word. It's so un-PC, it's practically a racial epithet. Okay, so this is me. The hilarious part of this is that I am mocking the other point of view with my sarcasm and my wit, that the
Right.
point of view that I now hold
Uh-huh. Yep.
because it it is women have come too far and worked too hard to obey their husband no matter what, and on and
Yep.
on and on, the things that and the Bible does seem legalistic, chauvinistic, and outdated because it was written 2,000 years ago, and it's so on and on and on. That gives you, like, a little bit of an idea of what I'm
Yep.
so I go on to talk about women dressing modestly and how if we can't flaunt our bodies and we cannot cause our brother in Christ to stumble. And if we do that, it's all on us, blah, blah, blah. So, purity culture, rape culture, like
Yep.
all of this stuff that I am blaming women slash myself for. And it's crap. Like, it's like, it's hard it's hard to read, it's hard to go back and do that. People have told me I burned all my journals, I can't do that. I get that, to each her own. For me,
Mhm.
um, this is part of what I do. Um I'm like this bridge from these toxic beliefs to these freeing, truer beliefs, and I want to show people how I got from there to here. And like you were saying earlier, that you and I do not hold all of the same exact views. Like we could not line up our beliefs and have them match up completely. But the difference, the important thing to me is that I'm more concerned with our core values and beliefs that harm other people, that I believe harm other people. I can't really be friends or close friends with that kind of person. Um, so me knowing and seeing your heart and believing, and the fact that you're my brother, we could work through some things even if I did think your heart was off or whatever.
Mhm.
But the idea that I can now be friends with people who I don't agree with on every single point, but those points don't actually matter as much in the whole grand scheme of things. And where I come from is that the certain beliefs that are very specific those matter so much and other
Yes.
things don't matter as much. Like, we had a talk beforehand, before we started recording, we are not going to cuss on this podcast. This is not a cussing podcast, and I respect that 1000%. I uh, I did not cuss for the first however many decades of my life because I thought it was just very, very vulgar and wrong. And one of the things as I deconstructed my faith that I started doing was using words that I had not used before. And my reasoning behind that is that people, this conservative evangelical Christians, so often, I wrote a whole book about it. It's a tiny little book called Mouth, which is what Dad used to call me when I was in high school. Not because of my cussing, but because I back talked. Like,
Yes.
if someone had something to say and I did not agree, you would get a mouthful from me. Um, but what I have really been focused on lately, and especially during this whole Trump double administration, is that Christians who clutch their pearls over a four-letter word that starts with F, yet they're casting their pearls to swine, like the Bible says, where they're voting
Mhm.
for someone who is actively harming people, is vulgar, is terrible, is a felon, like on and on and on and on and on and on and on. And I'm like, do we not see the hypocrisy? And they don't. When you're talking about Christian nationalism and all these things, and people reading the Bible and agreeing with this or not agreeing with that, hypocrisy is the word that just swoops up to the surface every time. People who don't wanna love their neighbor, don't wanna love the foreigner, don't wanna care for the poor, don't, it's hypocrisy. If you are saying that you follow the Bible, yet ignoring all of these things, then wow. And you know this as someone who's preached the Bible and is unbinding the Bible. And for me, it's a funny thing about the Bible because on the one hand, I'm like, "No, thank you" to the Bible because of these outdated, archaic, chauvinistic, whatever things. And on the other hand, I'm like, if people could actually read the Bible, what Jesus actually said, what Jesus actually did, what the prophets actually talked about, then they would have to change their whole lifestyle and they
Mhm.
wouldn't be voting for Donald Trump and on and on and
Mhm.
on and on.
Yeah.
And you and I have talked before about someone proving a point using only the words of Paul. Well, then you could refute using only the words from the prophets, or you could refute that with Paul's other words that
Right.
that
Right.
contradicted that. And so
Yep.
it's just so it's it's a mess. And the bottom line is weaponizing the Bible and not reading it and using it how it was originally intended, and the fact
Right.
that it is this library of books. It is not, words straight from the mouth of God and someone's holding a pen and it starts moving and they don't even know what they're writing down, and God just says these things, and it was in another language, in another time. It is so,
Sure. Yep.
so
Well,
deep, so vast.
yeah, absolutely, and I love all of this, and this is why. And so, yes, those ideas, I want people who are just like, "I still believe the Bible, I still follow Jesus, I still want," is to, I mean, Marla, you just teed me up, right? Let me, for people that are gonna listen to this episode because they follow you, let me just give a little blurb. The entire reason my podcast exists is because Jesus, after his resurrection, catches up with 2 followers of his who were on a road to Emmaus, and they are super depressed because the guy they just thought was the Messiah was just killed by the Romans. So Jesus comes up to him, he's like, "What are you talking about?" And they're like, "Man, have you been, like, under a rock during the last 3 days? Didn't you hear about this Jesus guy? Like, we thought he was the one who was gonna redeem Israel, but we must have been mistaken." And here's what's really cool. Of course, Jesus reveals himself to these guys. He ends up having a meal with them, and somehow Luke tells us that it was over the breaking of the bread that they recognized Jesus as who he really was, which I find fascinating. But what I really thought was interesting was these guys, based on their knowledge of the Bible, concluded that the Messiah they had been waiting for was not Jesus because he was killed. Instead of questioning, maybe they hadn't been reading the Bible properly, to see that it had really been pointing to Jesus the whole time. So, my whole premise for starting this podcast 7 years ago was under the assumption maybe people are still approaching the Bible wrongly today and failing to see how Jesus reworks the entire thing. And so that's how my podcast began was we went back to Genesis 1 and 2. I spent 3 months just like what is the Bible doing? How is it talking about humanity? How does it highlight all humans as equal image bearers of God, men and women? What is this, what has the fall done to races and nations and gender wars and all the rest? And then, I mean, we ended up in the book of Revelation, like you said, talking about the end times or talking about all the
Yeah.
scary things, right? The way we were taught Revelation was, hey, we're going to be perfectly raptured away, and all the horrible things that God's going to pour out on the earth is going to come to all those non believers, right? Um, the word rapture doesn't show up anywhere in that book. And, shocker, spoiler, we're here for the entire duration of that book, not to freak you out, but because we follow the one who was crucified at the hands of political authorities who were threatened by his very inclusive, very love driven mission of the kingdom. And so I love it. I mean, I did like 80 episodes in Revelation, but what you're saying is so like, so I don't let go of the Bible maybe as much as you because
Mhm.
I am convinced we have to use Jesus as the hinge to go back into the Old Testament and reread it with him in mind. So if all we pick up from the Old Testament, and I've seen so many Christians do this, God is angry and he's vengeful and he's interested in just punishing people for no reason. And then Jesus comes in and it's sort of like a timeout on God. Like, okay, God's going to give everybody this little chance. Jesus is nice to you and he treats people with love, but in the end, oh boy, God's coming back. He's coming back with a vengeance and you better not be on the wrong side of his wrath or you're going to pay. And I want to ask, if Jesus, as he claims, is the revelation of God to the world and is the final word that God has spoken about himself to the world, why are we undercutting Jesus who did not come? He said, I did not come into the world to condemn the world. I've come to save it. So I am excited about this conversation because what you're saying is true. Have we been reading the prophets wrongly? Have we been reading Paul wrongly? Have we been reading the Old Testament wrongly? And if we have, well, shame on us. But I mean, I get it. There was a lot of religious people in Jesus's day doing the same thing. And I it's hard to say this to church members when you are a current pastor, but a lot of times in the back of my mind, I preach assuming that the congregation members have Pharisaical beliefs embedded in them that are just a result of growing up in religious context. Like I don't know any other way to approach the Bible but to assume that those same dynamics are at work constantly in any type of religious establishment. It's not the religious establishment's fault per se, but we just like to think we're on the right side and those on the wrong side are ruining what's right for the rest of us. And you see that same thing happening in our culture and you see it happening in the gospels. Um, ugh. Anyway, sorry, I'm going to preach because I haven't been in a church preaching for several months and
I
it's
can
in there.
tell.
So
Yeah.
it's in there. Sorry about that. So I want it not a shift really, but there's a whole other part of your current work. You've got a massive following on Instagram, but you call it white girl learning. And I would love to tee you up to just tell us about that and how that started, what shape that takes, and how you have found so much joy in elevating people of color.
Yeah, so I told you that I've been reading since I was 4, and um, I would say that I was well read and reading diversely, and that is absolutely not true. I was reading only things from a conservative evangelical viewpoint, and what that usually meant was that the authors were white. So in 2009 and 10, we helped plant a church with a Black pastor friend of ours in Columbus, Ohio, called Sanctuary Columbus. and the dream was to be a multi-ethnic church, and this was my first time really to be, in close community with, multiple Black friends, and in 2012, when Trayvon Martin was killed, one of my friends put on Facebook, "Why are my white friends not talking about Trayvon Martin?" And I remember thinking, "What? Who? What? What is she talking about?" And I Googled it or something, I don't remember exactly, but he was, a young Black man shot down in his neighborhood. He was just holding tea and Skittles, and, another innocent Black life lost in a long, long, long string of this. A string of things that I had no idea about. In my white Christian bubble, having no concept of so many things throughout history, Jim Crow laws, mass incarceration, on and on, all these things that I've learned about since. So that took me on this journey of just waking up to racism and white supremacy. To me, it was just not really a big deal. Who knew? Well, a lot of people knew. I didn't know. So I'm learning all these things. I realize slowly that everybody I'm reading is white. And I've had people argue with me that they don't care about the color of the author's skin, they just read good books, they're not just choosing white people. But the thing is, if you don't intentionally choose who you're going to read, you're gonna read white people by default because there are more white people and they've been doing this publishing thing for longer. Back, 100 years or so ago in our country, a little bit more than that, if you were Black, you were not allowed to read or allowed to write or allowed to publish books. I collect
Uh-huh.
antique books that are over 100 years old. They're 100% written by white people, because Black people were not allowed. And so I started reading some books that I had never read before. Roll of Thunder, Hear My Cry is the only book I remember reading in school by a Black author. You probably were assigned it and did not read it.
That is probably
Uh,
accurate, yeah.
I read the autobiography of Malcolm X, someone who I was led to believe was not a good person, and I'm like, "Wow." I mean, sure, maybe he's not a perfect human. Guess who else isn't a perfect human? Me or anyone else. But I'm reading these things and learning things that I never knew. I start reading Toni Morrison and Alice Walker and James Baldwin, and I mean, I liken it to the time when I was student teaching in Okinawa, Japan, and I went snorkeling for the first time off a reef off the coast of Okinawa, and my mind was blown that that what existed under the water. And, like,
Mm.
75% of the planet is water, and this glorious movie is playing under here with all these fish and all this coral and all these colors and all this everything, and I look out at the ocean and I don't see it. I don't know it's there, and that's how I felt, that all of these books, all of this wisdom, all of this history, I didn't know it was even there. So I'm reading and reading and reading. This is in 2015, 16, 17, and we lived in Cambodia at the time, and someone that I knew, I started following her on Instagram, and I noticed that she posted this book and then, like, some little decor around it that kinda matched the cover of the book, and I looked at her Instagram feed, and it was all that. It was like a book with stuff around it, a book. I'm like, "Wait a minute. You don't have to just post, like, your kids or what you're eating for lunch. You could post a book on here, and you could make it look cool?" And so I decided it just came to me. I had read a book called Brown Girl Dreaming by a Black queer author named Jacqueline Woodson. That's her story of growing up and wanting to be a writer, and I've loved it, and I thought, "Okay, brown girl dreaming, I could be white girl learning." So December 1st, 2017 was my first post on this new Instagram, and I think it was Malcolm X, the autobiography of Malcolm X, and I'm propped it up against some books that had the red spines or something, I don't know, and then another time I would put a book in a tree or by flowers or, like, on my bed, and then it got more, like, advanced where I'm matching stuff or whatever, but, I I did 2 days a week for a while, 2 books a week, and then, moved to 3 books a week, and at some point, 2019 maybe, I started posting every day. So, I wasn't reading 7 books a week, but I was reading maybe 3 or 4, and Mondays with Mia, our niece Mia, when she was 10, she would read books by Black authors, Indigenous authors, other authors of color. She would write a little review about it, I'd post that. On Sunday, I would do a 6 stack of books, like, in a theme or books that the spines kind of the titles made a poem. It's called spine poetry, or 6 red books, 6 black books. Um, and yeah, people just started following along and paying attention and sharing my posts. And what I loved about doing this is I for me personally, I don't believe it's right for me to make money off of anti-racism education. I feel like the people who have been oppressed and marginalized by racism should be the ones who get to make money off of educating about it if they choose to do so. And I'm
Mhm.
also not really using my own words. I'm just taking books that they have already written. I'm sharing them with people on my platform, and I don't do negative or critical reviews. If I don't like a book, I won't post it. Or I'll say something kind of generic about it. Kind of like if you show me your baby and he's ugly, I'll be like, "Oh, your baby is precious." If your baby is cute, you're
Yep.
gonna hear cute. If your baby is not cute to me, it's gonna be a different word that could mean something else. So, um, in the last couple years, I have, slacked off. I stopped doing that. I couldn't read that many books anymore. I didn't have the time, have to earn money and take care of my family and such. And the algorithm of Instagram is such a mess. So I have like 14,000 followers, but I was getting like 3 likes on a post, which means that not a whole lot of people were seeing it. But I have met authors. I have met, authors that I respect and love who have endorsed my books, and who are now I consider my friends.
Awesome.
And it's I've met people in real life, like, my friend Gracia is a Black woman who loves history. Her Instagram is History with Her. She contacted me, in 2021 or maybe 2020, I can't remember. It was during the pandemic because we wore masks on our meeting at a bookstore, but she said, "I live in South Carolina too. My daughter lives in Columbia. I'm in town. Would you like to meet up at a bookstore?" So we met up. I just saw her again for, like, the 5th time maybe this week. We met up and went to another bookstore. My friend Taylor, who has an organization called Liberation is Lit, she was following me when I was in Cambodia, and I started following her back. And then at some point a couple years ago, she's like, "Whoa, whoa, whoa, whoa! You're in Colombia? So am I." And so now we've started this whole thing together where I find books for her to sell, and she fights book bans and goes to school board meetings. Um, so
Shout
it
out to Taylor.
yeah.
She's awesome. So,
Yes.
yeah.
Okay. So speaking of Taylor, and this is something I wanted to bring up before, Taylor and I went to Raleigh, where you live, and
Yeah.
we went to this secular homeschool conference, which is another whole story, and stayed with you and Jessica, your wife. And then I invited some other friends over for dinner who live in the area. And I just remember thinking to myself, and I shared this with you probably too, but the the idea that I could have these friends that before would not have fit, like, in this white conservative
Mhm.
evangelical box,
Mhm.
um,
Yeah.
and may have been welcome in your home before, but kind of like they're welcome, but we gotta make sure that we get them saved before they
Sure.
leave. And the fact that and an ironic thing was that my friends, invited you to their church.
Yeah.
You're the
Absolutely.
pastor, and they are and one of them is actually a Christian. On it all that to say, it was like this kind of full circle moment of yes, this has been hard. Yes, we've come on these different paths, but now, like, seeing where you and I both are, that we can be in this place where we can love everyone. And I the way I'm saying that sounds terrible because it sounds like I'm saying, "Oh, we can love the sinners now. We're free to love the sinners." No, we're
Mhm.
free to
Yeah,
love the freaking awesome people who can now actually love us and like us back because we don't have sticks up our butts. we're not
yep,
we're
yep,
not like all worked up about these things that don't matter. Like my world has expanded and it's not me that has graciously decided to love everyone else. It is literally that now I get to be embraced by all the wonderful, beautiful, fabulous, brilliant, amazing people who I didn't let myself be embraced by them
yep,
in the past
yep.
because we didn't see eye to eye on this list of things that I thought was all important. And so it's just it's been I mean, I'm not preaching on my white girl learning page.
Right, right.
I am enthusiastic and hoping that that's contagious. And I have the response, like I can't quantify it. It has been the response from so many angles, like people whose books I'm reading that they're so thrilled, people in marginalized communities who are so grateful, white, comfortable Christians that I have caused a little bit of discomfort, and then they've been grateful for that, and I've introduced them to people. So it has been, um, it changed my life, like 100% changed my life, and I'm so yeah, so grateful for it.
Oh, that is so beautiful. Yeah, that
Mm.
that I think is probably I know one of my questions was just what have been some of your biggest joys, about deconstruction, but I would say that's probably one of the biggest is that you detach yourself from this very limiting view, and I appreciated the way you said it. You're just like, it's just par for the course. I mean, you're gonna read white people. I went to college and seminary, and I was only ever taught by white men. So it's not a crack on them, but I mean, I remember being in a church as an associate pastor and having a pastor refer to a certain perspective. Well, that's liberation theology. And then here, listen, there's a, oh, that's feminist theology. And I remember being like, wait a minute. So white male theology is just theology, but every other theology has to have an adjective slapped on at the beginning of it. Wait a minute. And then I was like, well, that's exactly what we're believing because I'm only taught a perspective from people who think and look exactly like me. And
Uh-huh.
according to Jesus in the kingdom, that is the opposite of the reality. Like, there are people from every tribe, language, people, and nation. Like, that's a beautiful refrain that Revelation speaks of
Yeah.
over and over and over and over on purpose. And so, oh yeah, I love it. I could listen, you talk about white girl learning all day.
Well, Pete Enns, I think you might have read something of his. I remember reading the
Yeah,
book, The Sin of Certainty, in 2016. We were all actually our whole entire family was in a cabin together. That was the last time that our whole family was together, was
yeah.
2016. So our parents, all 4 of their kids, their spouses, and their kids. And I had that book in my bag, and anytime there was, like, a break or people were taking naps or whatever, I would sneak it out and read it because I didn't want anybody to know that I was
Uh-huh.
reading this book called The Sin of Certainty, but I have a T-shirt, from Pete Enns with these words on it: "Every theology has an adjective."
Oh, okay.
Because
That's awesome.
because that's
Yeah.
exactly right, and we don't just do it with theology, we do it with everything. White
Oh, yeah.
white male, blah, 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 is normal. Everything else is not normal. It's different.
Correct.
It's this. So,
Yep. Yep.
my friend Robert Monson says that for a long time his reading was lopsided, and he started reading a lot of Black women. Um, he is a Black man, but he had not read anything or much at all by Black women, and that's how I feel that my reading was lopsided for so long that I literally have to spend probably the rest of my life, um, evening that back out. So it's rare for me, to read
Mhm.
a book by a white man, just because I and even white women. I mean, I'm not saying I would never do it, but it's just 1 out of 20,
Yeah, that's awesome.
because it's so yeah, it's so lopsided.
Wow. Yeah, that's great, and of course, Pete Enns is a white man, I gotta throw that at you,
Yeah, oh, yeah, yeah.
but it's nice, and there are lots of times where I've asked the same question, like, I don't feel bad about myself that I'm a white male. I mean, I
No,
had very little control over that, but
Yep,
then
same.
it's saying, "What do I do with that position?" I
Yeah,
definitely know that I'm when it comes to the pecking order and things of that nature, I'm at the top, which is
yeah,
unjust unless you say, "Okay, well, then what can I do with my position
yeah.
or my perspective?" I think Jamar Tisby, The Color of Compromise,
Mm, yep,
that was the first time, and I've read that twice now. He did a little series on Amazon Prime a couple years ago where he did, like, little 20-minute things that kinda covered his chapter. They're really well done, but that book really messed with me because that's where I started. He's still a Presbyterian. Well, he was a pastor for a while, but is saying, here's like it's not just that slavery was bad, but it was being promoted by white Christian men in churches, and here's like they just fell right into the same cultural lies and deceptions that everybody else did, and that's also what I'm holding on to is just asking, is it the theology that's wrong, or is it the way people are again, that salvific gospel versus the gospel of the kingdom? Do you allow those beliefs to drive a changed life, which is ultimately what Jesus was after? It wasn't just like checking off a list of beliefs because you had these people going to churches in the morning and then going out to lynchings in the afternoon. Like
yep, yep,
what kind of cognitive dissonance does that require
mhm,
to allow that to happen?
yeah,
But yeah, so that's been good, and I have several more books that I'm trying to work through as well for that same perspective. But I like that, Pete Enns. Yeah, every theology has an adjective, and I think
yeah,
that's exactly right. Um, so I've got a couple more questions that I sent to you. I'm going to flip the order of one of them, but I would
okay.
say, I mean, you've probably already touched on this, but maybe just like give us the top 2 or 3, what were the biggest reasons, like the biggest drivers for you for the deconstruction? And I know you said, Rachel held I guess that was one of the things, but that were yeah, I don't wanna put words in your mouth, but what would you identify as, like, these were the ones that just really punched me the most and made me take a giant step back and rethink?
I mentioned the hole in our gospel where,
Oh, yeah.
we had where people just said all they need is Jesus, all they need is salvation, and coming from I just made a post recently that actually went a little bit viral, which is fun because people started paying attention to my books and buying them, which is it's always nice.
Yeah.
It's nice to have things that you've already written, and then you can just pull them out, and say, "Hey, here, I wrote this about this." But the the idea that I grew up believing is that Republicans were Christians and Democrats were godless. And when
Mm,
when Democrats would talk about feeding the poor or loving people, I have a poem that LOVE and POOR were like four-letter words to me as a Republican Christian because I didn't wanna talk about that. So I'm, like, equating this Republican thing with, like, not helping people and you and I have had plenty of conversations about, like, Democrats and Republicans, and it's not really even about that. It's about the idea, um, that that salvation is the most important. Like, when I lived in Cambodia for 5 years, we had these bamboo libraries that was like my brainchild, this thing that I came up with, my baby, and, we stopped proselytizing, like, to kids in these libraries at some point, or at least I tried to get them to stop because I just it dawned on me that, that it was manipulative. People are called rice Christians in developing countries where you go in and you offer them food, in exchange for getting saved, basically. "Come to our revival, we're gonna tell you about Jesus, and we'll give you food." Why are these people coming? They're coming for the food. They're starving. They need food. They're coming for the chicken. They're coming for the rice. Um, these kids are coming to the libraries because they need education. They don't have books, and then we are shoving Jesus down their throat. And I got into some big fights with people, and they're like, "That's not what it is. It's the truth. You're giving them the truth." And I said, "Do you want your kid to go to story time at the library and the teacher is Muslim and she's telling them that they have to do all of these things and like that's how they can be saved the Muslim way and this is how Islam works or whatever." And people said back, "Well, that's different because that's not the truth." And I I just came to this realization that it doesn't matter to me what's the truth or what's not. I'm not manipulating people. I'm not making them follow my religion so that they can have the thing that I have to offer because I'm a quote unquote rich white person. So
Uh-huh.
that was one of them. I mean, the racism thing where people when I started talking about racism because I woke up to it and people not only didn't want me to talk about it, they're like, it has nothing to do with Jesus. It's not important. You need to stop talking about it. And I'm seeing people being innocently shot down, being sent to jail unjustly, um, all of the inequality that never stopped from slavery to emancipation to Reconstruction to Jim Crow laws to segregation. Like all of this is still happening today. And the Christians are saying, don't talk to us about it. We don't want to hear it. And then meeting queer friends, like meeting gay people, meeting gay Christians who had been praying every day for 30 years that God would take the gay away because they thought it was a sin. And God ignored it and didn't answer and wouldn't take it away. And that there was a man who his name is BT Harmon. In the back of my book, Unbelieve, he actually let me just free of charge. um, I have it Appendix E, affirming gay marriage, 19 reasons why Christians are moving toward affirming gay marriage. And I list out all 19 reasons. And the first one he says, they know really kind gay people who love the Lord and are doing their best to honor him. They believe the many verses in the Bible that say a proof for real faith is loving your fellow believer. They see their gay friends doing this, bearing the fruit of the Spirit, and believe their faith to be authentic. And BT was one of those people for 30 years, 3, 4, 5, 6 times a day. God help me not be gay. God help me not be gay. God's like, nope,
Mm.
sorry. And I just could not like that cognitive dissonance of all these people I was meeting that quote unquote couldn't help being gay and loved Jesus. It just flipped this idea of the gay agenda. People are evil. They're choosing sin. They're this and that. I'm like, whoa, 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 whoa. how can how can God not answer this prayer? Um, and so then I started doing a deep dive. I read some books about the verses in the Bible that talk about homosexuality, the um, the cultural context for that, the idea that in 1946 some of the wording was changed because people didn't want like this Bible that we have. Not only is it written so many years ago and in a different culture, but when I learned Khmer, the Cambodian language, and realized how many things don't translate very well, um, I realize that we're taking things at what we think are face value and not really understanding what they mean. And I use this example a lot, but my 16-year-old Khmer tutor, we read through the entire New Testament together. She read it in English, I read it in Khmer. So I would read a verse in Khmer, then she would read it in English, and the side-by-side translation helped me understand some of it. But the word for circumcision in Khmer literally translates to cut skin. Um, which makes sense, right? But in Khmer, in
Mhm.
Cambodia, they don't do circumcision. Circumcision is not 0% of Cambodian men are circumcised. Um, and so how on earth would a Cambodian reading the Bible know what circumcision is when it literally just says cut skin? Cut what skin?
Mm.
They've
Right,
never heard
right.
of that in their whole entire life, and that is one small example of something that doesn't even translate. Like, it
Yeah.
doesn't translate at all and make any sense, and you think about how much we're missing. I know you have studied more deeply the languages that the Bible was written in, but, so yeah, the my gay friends, the racism, the whole inner gospel, and the idea of why are we taking a Bible literally when it wasn't to us, for us, it's not in our language, and we're not actually taking it literally. We are cherry picking. All of us are cherry picking, and people get very defensive when you say that. Um, but it's the actual absolute truth that no one is taking the Bible 100% literally. Speaking of Rachel Held Evans, she wrote a book, I forget what it's called, but it's something about being a wife. So she took a whole bunch of Bible passages literally and, like, did this for a few months, like, as an experiment, and she's just showing it's a funny book, but, um, yeah, so those were, um, some of the things, and that's what I write about in my books. So my books of poetry are they're unconventional poetry, they're pretty straightforward, they're not ambiguous, but it goes from Unbelieve to Jaded to Whole, and Unbelieve just tells the whole story of all the questions and doubts and things that I started, thinking about, the things that started to shake my certain faith, and I wanted it to
Mm,
be a two books. I wanted to be, "This is how I got to deconstruction, and this is where I am now on the other side," but as I tried to write that happy 2nd book, I was very um, angry. And I
yeah.
wrote Jaded, which is a poetic reckoning with white evangelical Christian indoctrination, and then went on to write Whole, which is a happy ending, yes, but it's actually the beginning of the rest of my life, of what life looks like for me on the other side. And I wanted to say one thing, I thought about this when you were talking, about Jesus and the Bible and how Jesus you have to read the Bible through the lens of Christ coming and stuff. And you and I talked about this, I know, when, we saw each other last month, and one of the things I think that, is a difference for us, it's not necessar I mean, it is a difference of belief, but it's kind of just a difference in choice. Um, I hear all the things that you say about Jesus, and I was, like, so deep, so passionate, so intensely in love with Jesus for so long, and now I just hear you say it, and nothing really resonates deeply with me about it. I think, "Oh, that's nice." Because for whatever reason, and maybe this will change, but I don't feel a passion for making everything about Jesus. I have some poems about how all of the things that Jesus stood for and did, and that's great, but I actually feel like I don't need Jesus to love my neighbor. Like, I have neighbors and people, I have Muslim neighbors and all who have loved me and cared for me and invited me into their home when I had no money and my husband didn't have a job and all of this, and they are not followers of Jesus. I have friends who, have no religion, who are kind and love their neighbor and do all the things that Jesus did, and they don't follow any kind of religion. I have Buddhist friends, I have Hindu friends, and so for me, I am perfectly happy with people who follow Jesus and see him in all these things and can do all of that. And I, at this point in my life, don't feel like I need it. I was talking to someone who is related to both of us, um, by marriage once, and we were talking about how I no longer believe in hell. And he was really caught up on that and was like, "Okay, well, then what's to keep you from sinning? Like, if there's no hell, like, what's to keep me from cheating on my wife
Wow,
if there's no
wow.
hell?" And I looked him in the eye and I said, "Are you telling me that you would cheat on your wife," who was sitting there right beside him, "if there was no hell, then you would absolutely cheat on your wife." And he's like, "No, I wouldn't cheat on her." Like, he loves her, like, they have the best marriage, he loves her dearly, would never do that. I'm like, "See, that's you can do that without a hell gun held to your head because
Right,
you are a good person." We were
right.
taught over and over and over and over and over again that we are evil. We are sinners. We are worthless. We are worms. We are wretched people who are nothing. I wrote that in my Blushing Bride book. I just read it yesterday that I am worthless, 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 a piece of trash without God, without Jesus. And for me, I am reclaiming that. No, I'm not. I'm
Right.
actually not. And I can actually love people so well. I have had friends, there was a period of time a couple years ago when I had like 4 friends over the period of a couple weeks text me and say something very similar. I don't know if they all got together or what, but they were like, "Marla, don't be offended, but I really see God in you." And, like,
Ah,
it's like me quitting God, but they're like, "Oh, I'm sorry to say this. I know you don't like him right now, but I just you
that's
really
funny.
are resembling him. Like, I just see you." And so, what do I believe about God? Like, where have I landed? Everybody wants to know. I don't actually know, and the freedom of not knowing and not caring that I don't know right now is just
Yeah. Yeah.
unbelievable, but I do believe in something, some divine thing, some spiritual thing, some I mean, ideas rush into my head, things happen in my heart, coincidences, like different things that I always would have called a God thing. And my friends and I joke because we do call it a God thing still because we don't know what else to call it. And I do know some people that have come up with other things to call it. But that idea that something is around us, something is inside of us. But I now believe, like I have a shirt with a quote by a woman, a black woman, Intisaki Shange. I think it's her name. I might have gotten that wrong. But she says, oh, now I can't remember the quote, but something about searching for God and finding her inside of me, like finding
Mm,
God inside of me. And even if you do believe in God and the Bible and all that, and then creation, like made in God's image, and like we are, like there's God in us. Jesus living in you means inside of you. It's a whole, like there's just so many ways to think about it, but being open to the idea that one person can do it this way, one person can look at it this way, one person can study the Bible their whole lives. Like I have multiple friends. You're not my only friend who spends a lot of time in the Bible. And I I don't right now, and if part of me thinks that I started reading it when I could read, like, I was reading it when I was 5 and 6, like, I read it for decades while you were off having fun, and
that's
now I'm
right.
like, "Okay, he can read it now, I'm gonna go off I'm gonna go
I'm
off
gonna
and
go
have
off and have
fun."
fun. That's right.
Yeah,
That's right.
but it's yeah, it's so I also I don't go to church, and it's funny to me that you and I are recording this on a Sunday morning, which historically you would have been very busy on a Sunday morning, and so
Right.
would I with
Right.
Sunday school, church. Um, I have not been to church. I mean, a couple different times I've gone for to go see someone or something, but I haven't been to church since 2017. And I promise you, every Sunday morning every Sunday morning for 8 years, I wake up and think, "I love not going to church."
Wow.
I years and years so you got paid to go to church, which is a great gig, I think, because I put in years and years and years and years, decades of my life of unpaid
Unpaid.
labor,
Yeah.
unpaid labor. I am divorced, we did not talk about that. My ex-husband left in September 2020 unexpectedly right after we moved back from Cambodia. I found out 4 months later that he had been cheating on me for 4 of the 5 years we lived in Cambodia. I have not
Mm,
been on a date in 5 years or had any romantic interest in a man or anyone else, and that it's very similar to the church thing. Years and years and years and years of unpaid emotional, physical, mental labor. That is what my marriage was. Were there good things about church? Yes. Were there good things about my marriage? Yes. But the overarching theme was I sacrificed myself and gave everything of myself, poured everything out and I'm empty. Like, there's nothing left for
Uh,
me to give to a person in that kind of relationship or to a church. And so I am just filling myself back up. And yes, I still like my friends who said they see God in me. I'm still loving people and helping people and doing things that Christians would do. Um, but I'm just not doing it from that perspective or in a church or unpaid
yeah.
labor that I didn't choose, like volunteering in the church nursery was never my thing. I volunteer by buying books at thrift stores for Taylor to sell, to fight for liberation for people. Like I get to be who I am my whole life. Like the books that I read, the hardest thing for me was me sacrificing who I was to
Mm,
try to be who I thought God wanted me to be. I mean, my journals are filled, Josh, with me crying out to God, "I am so sorry I'm
mm.
not submitting more to my husband. I'm so sorry that I'm a
Wow.
terrible soldier
Yep.
for you, Christ. I'm so sorry that I'm just so tired. I'm sorry that my children are 18 months and 2 weeks and my husband doesn't lift a finger to help and I am trying to do everything myself and I have not spent 4 hours in prayer today because I fell asleep." Like, it's just
Yep.
on and my friend Paul told me, today on a Facebook post that my Enneagram oneness, where I'm always trying to be the best at things and whatever, he said that was probably really hard for you, that combination of, like,
Yep.
trying to be a good wife and Christian or whatever, and just trying to be so good and work so hard, for so long. So, yeah, I'm
Yep.
happy to listen to you talk about Jesus, every now and again. And also, like, I I'm tired of it. So, we're all different, and we can all still be friends if we share those common values and people aren't, like, voting for things that harm our people we love or they're not
Yep.
lifting up these podcaster people who spew hatred out one side of their mouth and pretend they love Jesus out the other side, and yeah, it is a lot, but I am just so I know we've been talking for a long time. I could talk to you like, I could do multiple episodes just talking about all of these things with you,
I
but
know.
I'm just
Yeah.
really, really grateful for you and our relationship that is deeper and better and stronger now than it's ever been. Like you mentioned, we're squabbling siblings back in the day and then drift apart. And then I do this and you do that and you're a pastor, then I deconstruct. But then just being able to have so much in common and like each other. Like our kids like each other. We
Right.
have fun
Yep.
together. I love your
Yep.
wife. And if I'm being honest, and I won't share anything private
Yep.
about your wife, but if I'm being honest, she is the one person in my whole entire family who is probably the closest in alignment
Yeah.
to who I am and what I believe and how I feel about things,
Yep.
which is kind of funny because she's not related to me. Well, it's not I guess it's not funny, it probably makes more sense. She didn't grow up the way that I did. So, but
Right.
yeah, that's just it's fun to be a grown up. Um,
Oh, I know. It
yeah.
is. I thought you were gonna say for a minute, I thought you were gonna say, don't no offense, but I think I like her better than I like you. I was pretty sure that's what you were gonna say, and I was gonna agree with you, so that would be fine.
Okay, no,
But it
I like you both. I mean, the fact that she's a woman and a mom and we have more in common and all of that
right.
might I mean, shoot, if
Yep.
I was gonna
Yep.
pick one of you
She
to be a
fits the
friend,
bill.
yeah, but
That's right. That's right. Well, it's really funny too because you even said, getting to know, "I'm sorry that I'm not this," or I'm writing in my journal, "I'm sorry that I'm not a better this," and there was a book I read several years ago and have read it a couple of times since. It's called The Gift of Being Yourself
Mm,
by David Benner, and I read this in 2016, I believe, so I was right in the middle of my being a pastor place, and he was talking about, the love of God for you and not the you that you think you're supposed to be or the you that you've been taught you're supposed to be, but the actual you. And I was just in a really kind of vulnerable place in my own life, but I remember sitting in my office at our church, just sobbing
Mm,
because I really don't know if prior to that point, I knew the love that God actually has for me.
mm,
Like the messed up me, the quirky me. I've fought for years. Like you were, talking about my wife, but we follow kind of like the reverse stereotypes of the male female relationships, which I remember being taught growing up. You're the man is the leader and he's the take charge and the type A personality and always makes quick, good decisions. I don't do any of those things.
yeah,
Like
yep,
that's not
yep.
me at all. And so I didn't realize I had been kind of carrying that baggage with me. But one of the things I'm picking up just as we're talking is that we've kind of in the evangelical Christian church, we've kind of created this world of like, quote unquote, let's go worship Jesus, right? And that
Mhm.
means go to church, go sing some songs, do your liturgy or whatever you do. And it's like Jesus doesn't really talk about doing that. What he talks about doing is following him as he's loving and drawing in like Jesus,
Uh-huh.
infuriates the Pharisees, right? Like that one scene where the Pharisees are like, "Why is your teacher eating with tax collectors and sinners?" And it's so funny. It's like, where do religious people get the idea that they're supposed to be concerned about what other people do with other people? Like, where
Oh
does that
my.
come from? And so,
They made
and
a
and
whole
that
religion out of it. That's their
they
only
do,
thing.
they do, and I remember preaching a sermon, and I tied in, the fall, like, in the fall, right, we didn't just take the knowledge of good and evil for ourselves and not trust God with that knowledge, but once you take one thing that belongs to Him, it's very easy to take another thing, and so now we've taken His role as judge, and we've
Uh-huh.
decided that our role is to be the judge and the garter of everything that everybody else in the world does. And I
Yeah.
remember I preached this, I tied it into Matthew 7 where Jesus explicitly says, "Do not judge." And I had a guy, like, I love him to death. He's an older member, very different views than me, but he's always like open hand. Like he's always willing to be challenged. And he said to me, he's like, "Well, like if we can't judge other like then what's the point of this?"
Okay,
Same
I
thing as
had
you
a
said
yeah,
before.
I had somebody tell me, "If there's no hell, then what's the point of being a Christian?"
Then
I
what's
was
the
like,
point? It's
"Oh
the
my
same
god."
thing, and he was like, "Then what are we supposed to do?" And I was like, "Whoa, whoa, whoa. What do you mean, what are we supposed?" Like, I'm telling you, it's the judging,
Yeah.
and another great book, by the way, is Greg Boyd's Repenting of Religion, and
Mm,
in there, he talks about you can't love and judge at the same time, it's
mm,
impossible. So, every time you swap and he keeps using, he's like, "We take from the forbidden tree and we set ourselves up as judges." We are incapable of loving when we do that.
yeah.
And I love that because I think that's so true. And so even as you're talking, you're loving your neighbors, you're listening to people, you're valuing them as human beings made in the image of God. That to me sounds like following Jesus,
Right,
whether or not you call it that.
right.
But nowhere really does I go to church or I serve in the nursery. I mean, those are great things to do. And I'm not poo pooing anybody who does those. But the idea that just by doing that, in other words, it's like we've decided Jesus came, in my view, to turn us into better humans. And somehow religion steps in and makes us worse. It potentially can make us worse humans
Yep.
in the process or shields us from him wanting to do that deep heart work to
Yeah,
make us more patient and more kind and
yeah.
more loving to where our judgmental, pompous arrogance is praised because we're quick-witted and we can win a debate and all the rest of this
Mhm.
crap, which has never been part of the story.
Well, and you
Um,
you have Christians
yeah.
now, it's getting worse because Christians are writing books about empathy being a sin. Like,
Oh
the
my god.
the idea, that whole thing and then we won't go into this, but, as you know, someone in our family disowned me for being a heretic, and what this
Right.
person said to me multiple times, "Sometimes love feels like hate, Marla, and that
Mm.
you don't need to hear this loving whatever, you need to be told the truth, it's Christ and him crucified, on and on and on." But that whole idea, like you said, of judging being the point. And what do we have if we don't have that? And that boggles my mind. And this person, they did concede something to me at one point because they were saying how I talk about love and blah, blah, and they talk about truth and they talk about sin. And I brought up even the John 3:16 verse. If we pull things out of context like that, it is literally, for God so loved the world that he gave his
Right.
only son. Like, it leads with love. The creation account leads with, like, creating things in God's image and people and
Yeah.
perfection
Yeah.
and this
Yeah.
whatever. Sin isn't the main point. Judging isn't the main point. And when you are able, like, when you look at yourself as a worm and wretched and worthless without Jesus, then you see the other, you're like, "Well, now I have Jesus, so I'm good." But these other people
Yes.
don't have him, so they are worthless, wretched, evil,
Right.
terrible, and worthless is a big, big, big deal when we say, and I literally wrote those words in my Blushing Bride book, I am worthless, worthless, like
Wow.
worth nothing. And that is how we can then say an immigrant that comes across the border, worthless.
Correct. Yep.
Worthless. People in Gaza, worthless. You, worthless. Indigenous peoples, worthless. This black man that got gunned down, worthless. All of it worthless. Never mind that some of them may be Christians. Like,
Right.
that doesn't even cross anybody's mind. It is now,
Right.
I am this and I am superior, and they are worthless. They are
Yep.
worth nothing. Their life has no value. That is the antithesis. That's the peak of the hypocrisy, and that's what I can't. The post that I did that went viral, I was saying, "I get it. I was there. I was the Republican. I was indoctrinated. I believe these things or whatever." I said, "But to be truthful, I feel like I still led with love. Like, I really desperately wanted my gay friends to go to heaven. Like, I wanted them to repent so that they didn't go to hell. Like, I loved them. Now, I feel like people just lead with cruelty and hate. Like, I don't see
Right.
people on the right or people supporting Trump who are like, "We just love you, Democrats. We want you to go to heaven. So we need you to da, 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 da." It's there's no love. It's I hate
Yeah.
everybody. I hate anybody who's not like me, who doesn't look like me, who doesn't talk like me, who and I I don't know what to do in the face of all of that except just to love, keep writing, keep sharing, keep like you keep podcasting, keep making art, whatever it is,
Yep.
just keep
Yep.
doing that thing and hoping that that can spread, um, which is kinda like the whole idea of sharing the gospel. It's like
Right.
spreading the
Right.
goodness, helping other people have a better life. My friend Trey Ferguson, who is a pastor, who says that his definition of love is the commitment to wholeness. And I am obsessed with that because love doesn't feel like hate. Love is committed to your wholeness. So if I'm committed to your wholeness, Josh, I'm not trying to make you like me, and I'm not trying to make you into something you are not. I want you to be
Right.
whole and who you are and who you are made to be, whether you believe God created you or you believe in something else, that you being as you possibly can be will mean that you are whole. And if we could all be as us as we are, and that's what people don't want. They don't That's why they're fighting against anyone who's queer or trans or like women getting out of line or anything. Like, you can't or deny your blackness and join this white evangelical church and act like you're not black or all these things. It's they're saying we can be one in Christ by all becoming this one certain way. That's not what that means. If this
Right.
God who created everyone in God's image, and you look out and see all the things like that were created before humans, if we're talking about a creation story, the diversity is off the charts. Like, it's
Yep.
so you're telling me that God's gonna create a planet and a universe where everything is wildly different in every color, in every shape, and every size, but the humans all have to be like this cookie cutter same way? That doesn't even make
Right.
any sense. So, it
Right.
says right there in the Bible, we're all created in God's image, eh, but yet we're not all the same. Like, that's
Right,
and people can't see that. They can only see God's image in you if you look like them. Like, and what does that
right.
mean? They're seeing their image, not God's
Correct.
image. Yeah. Anywho, now I'm preaching. Woo!
Now you are. Hey, it's a Sunday morning. It's right in church time. So this is perfect. This is
Ah,
perfect. It's even funny. I'll kind of wrap it up with one more thought, but just
okay.
as I'm hearing you too, like it's this separation, right? Between, okay, it's my little faith here versus the way that I'm actually living my life.
Yeah.
And in First Corinthians, right, when it's this famous passage, and we read it every week in our church, or we did, where it's communion. On the night that he was handed over to suffering and death, our Lord Jesus Christ took bread, and when he broke it, he gave it to his disciples, saying, "Take, eat. This is my body, which is given for you. Do this in remembrance of me." And so we come and we receive communion, right? And it's this. But the scene in First Corinthians was that Paul was saying that there were several members of the church there who were being judged because they weren't, like, doing communion right, and it was this really weird phrase, and you're like, "What do you mean you weren't doing it right?" And what was happening in Corinth was that the rich people were gathering for this communal meal, and they were eating the food before the poor people from the church got there because they were out doing work,
That
and
tracks.
so what would it tracks, what was happening was this meal of communion is meant to be a celebration and an acknowledgement that Jesus said, "The first shall be last, and the last first." So in communion, Jesus, who is the Lord of all, right, lays his life down for everyone, the first being the last. And then people that don't view it that way are going to be removed, right, from his presence. But here's what's weird: the people in Corinth were celebrating the Lord's Supper, the supper that's supposed to represent the first will be last, but they were doing it in a way where they were making the first shall be first. And Paul actually says, "I don't know what kind of meal you're having, but it's not the Lord's Supper that you're eating."
Mhm.
And it's right there in the passage. And we have turned this thing into this like religious activity, but it's right in the Bible where you can do it and it all of a sudden is no longer a religious activity at all. It's like the
Mhm.
exact opposite.
Mhm.
And so that's a large part why I liked the Anglican world because it's sacramental. It realizes that individual things carry like communal value and
Yeah.
weight in addition to just being individual. And so I would preach that at our church all the time. And I've just I kind of just wish I could keep doing it. But as I said in the last episode, I couldn't, I
Yeah.
can't do it forever. And I just think my time is going to be for another day and another position at some point. So, well, Marla, this has been better than I was hoping. So, thank you. So I wasn't necessarily hoping. I was just like, we're gonna have a great conversation. It'll be great.
Oh,
But
that's
this was
funny.
even better than I thought. So
So, what
I
you're
even had
saying is you underestimated how awesome I was. Okay, I no,
that is
I'm
absolutely
kidding,
true.
but I will say I have a poem, and this is not you, I am not comparing you to this person, but it just reminded me of this, it's funny. Um, I did a podcast a couple years ago when my book Jaded came out, I think, and at the end of it, after we had pressed stop, so it was a man who interviewed me, and he said something to the effect of, "Wow, I am shocked, like, you really know your stuff." And I thought so the poem is about, yes, how would a woman know all of these things that because I'm a woman or I'm this it's like, "Oh, so shocking." But
Yeah,
no, what you meant was that I am your sister, and while we have fun conversations, imagine me coming on your Bible podcast as someone who
I
doesn't
know.
read her Bible, and somehow it was still, really powerful and really fun. Yeah.
Absolutely. Shocking, right?
Shocking.
Yes. No, that's wonderful. I love it. I love it. I love being shocked on a Sunday morning in a good way. So I mean, hey, I came back from the gym. I had a great workout this morning. It was, yeah, it was just nice. It was a nice morning, and it's tough. Like this, my one day off, so I
Yeah.
take it a little bit more of a restful time. So, well, I am really excited. I will be releasing this in the next couple days, so I will let you know. But Thank you so much for coming on my show. Congratulations, and thanks for getting a lot more listens on the last episode. And we'll see where it goes from here.
All right. Love you, man.
Love you. All right. Bye
Bye.
bye.